And we are live again. And if anybody who's a regular viewer of the Beyond a Doubt of the Benefit of a Doubt podcast knows, we display all of our warts. And I will just I'm a little embarrassed to mention, but it's also funny as hell that we just totally had a false start on this whole podcast. We hit it hard and we hit the ground running. And you know what? Nobody could watch it, and it was great. So here we are. This is the Benefit of the Doud podcast. This is a brand new segment that we are debuting. When in doubt, ask the experts, because I am clearly not an expert. No, our expert today is Mishaal Rahman, who you may know him as, and the way I think of him is the super nerd who reaches down into the guts of Android and pulls them out and puts them all on display so that idiots and I, like me, can understand what's going on. So having said all that, let's greet our expert, Mishaal Rahman. Welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Adam.
Again.
And yeah, I'm gonna yes. I did mention, you guys didn't hear this. I just commented on how intense and bombastic the opening is.
Yep.
And yeah,
you were
in the middle of thanking Cliff for.
Yes, I was. So during that false start, we also played the 24-esque countdown that normally precedes a live show. And so here's the real tragedy here. We have never run this show on time before at all. But I mean, we even started that countdown 30 seconds before we were supposed to go live. I mean, it was to the tick. And I'm just a moron, and that's where we are. I mean, that's the benefit of a Doud podcast. You come for the tech and stay for the idiocy. But anyway, so we are here to talk about just a little preview for those of you who are tuning in. We are here to talk about Android 14, specifically what happened at Google I/O. We're going to get a little bit into the generative AI stuff that I think Google made like a passing reference to it during Google I/O. It was roughly about 75 minutes or so of the 2-hour presentation. You barely saw it, I mean, is what I'm saying. But anyway, so we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about Android 14, and there is a better than average chance that my dogs are going to go bat crap crazy during the show, because I'm going to have a really cool device delivered that I'm going to be reviewing over on SlashGear. And if that happens, in an apology to my dogs going absolutely nuts, we are going to do a live on the air unboxing of that device. So stick around, folks. This show is going to get crazy. It already has been crazy. So, Mishaal, let's go ahead and dive into Google I/O specifically. And my whole thought process was, if we're going to talk about Google I/O, who better to have on than you, because you are the Android expert. Like, you are the guy. You're the one that, every time a beta drops, you're in there and you're pulling out everything and you're like, hey, here's what's coming here, and here's some code that shows that this is going to be doing a thing that's with. And I don't understand any of that, because I'm a professional idiot. So why don't we talk a little bit about Android 14 as it was announced at Google I/O? And because there wasn't a heck of a lot of it there. So why don't we just kind of do like a whole, 1,000-yard high-level view of the whole thing, that as you saw it at Google I/O?
Well, what they showed off at Google I/O is actually kind of more pixel specific than Android 14 specific, for one. And two, a lot of these features are kind of also being baked into the quarterly platform releases that we're seeing for the Pixel phones, the Android 13, QPR1, QPR2, QPR3. So a lot of these features aren't technically new to Android 14, but for most users who will be updating their devices, we'll be seeing them for the first time when or if they update to Android 14. But so to name some of the features they announced, so lock screen shortcut customization. So instead of just having the home control icon on the bottom left and the wallet icon on the bottom left, you could say have a flashlight or the QR code reader or the whatever else they showed. I don't have the exact list, but
sure.
That's one thing they showed off. Another thing they showed off is the lock screen clock customization. So you can customize the style and the color of the clock that's shown on the lock screen. And then they also showed off a bunch of AI powered features for their wallpapers. So you can have a cinematic wallpaper that applies a parallax effect to wallpapers, any photo that you've taken, so you have like a kind
Yeah.
of a 3D effect. Then they also have a fully generative AI wallpaper maker that it's not. I'm pretty sure it's not run on the device, but you send a prompt and then it generates a selection of wallpapers for you to pick from. That Google says will be completely unique because it's completely generated from scratch.
Right.
And
Right.
then they also showed off the emoji wallpaper, which is lets you like create a mishmash of emojis to set as your wallpaper. So a lot of personalization and customization stuff that is on the backbone of AI. I mean, the lock screen clocks and the lock screen shortcuts aren't really AI related, but they're
No.
in the same vein as personalization customization, which is what the focus was on during this IO keynote.
But like, so the lock screens in particular, I mean, that's obvious. It seemed to me anyway that was a pretty obvious no, that's probably not a great reference, but an obvious counter to Apple's lock screens that came out at WWDC last year. So I mean that to me seemed like a pretty obvious, like, oh well, I guess we need to do this now. Like Android's always had like cool lock screens, and specifically Motorola has I forget the name for it, the dynamic lock screens where you can like tap on the icon and slide and do replies and stuff like that. That's always been fun. But like, I got to admit, after playing with the lock screens on the iPhone, those are kind of fun and they're a little addictive to, like, what do I want my lock screen to you look like today? And like you can really get lost in a lock screen if you let yourself. Um,
Yeah.
so I thought that was a pretty good. I thought that was a pretty good counter. The emoji one, I guess take it or leave it. I'm probably going to be more of a photo, and the parallax effect that you were talking about. I don't know. I assume you probably use Google Photos, and I assume probably most of my
Yes.
listeners use Google Photos. But every once in a while, Google Photos, the assistant in Google Photos will say, "Hey, we made this 3D picture of you," and you like look, and it's like my daughter, and like slowly zooming in on her. I'm like, that's kind of cool, but also a little freaky because I didn't do that. Like, but so yeah, doing something like that on the lock screen could be, I think, pretty compelling, and it was as shown on stage.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think a lot of what they showed off on stage for Android 14. Clearly, it's just scratching the surface of what is actually in the release,
Hmm.
and clearly, it's just the things that would appeal the most to users. Because you got to understand, like this keynote was jam packed with AI references, and that's all because of investors and the pressure they're
Right.
feeling from ChatGPT. The whole world was looking at Google, like how are you going to respond to Microsoft, to OpenAI, to everything else is going on, right? So
Yeah.
that's why you had 75 minutes of AI, and then like 5 minutes of here's some AI features in Android. And whereas
Yeah. It
there
was
was
kind
not
of
a
like.
single mention of Android 14 beta 2 because that's not strictly AI related.
Right. It was kind of like that movie Click with Adam Sandler, where they like hit the fast forward button during the Android section because. But like I commented in our internal Slash Gear Slack, I commented that this year's Google I/O seemed a lot more developery than previous Google I/Os, because like previous Google I/Os they
Yes.
were talking about, because and they did device announcements, and we could definitely talk about the devices as well because there's a lot going on there too. But like in the past, I would say probably like 3 years, give or take, Google I/O has been very like, here's what's coming to Android, and here's all the ways that your phone is going to be so much better, and blah blah blah. And this year, they just really focused a lot on like developer stuff, to the point
Mhm.
where like my eyes were kind of glazed over. I mean, like I'm sure you were like edge of your seat with the popcorn, uh, but I've just never been that kind of a nerd, and so but it's good because Google I/O is, spoiler alert, a developers conference. So I thought it was kind of a good throwback. Maybe not, the sexiest throwback that Google could have done, but I thought it was good to like get back to the core of what Google I/O was supposed to be.
Well, I think it was very calculated because, as I mentioned before, like this is clearly trying to get, how are they going to respond to ChatGPT, to OpenAI, etc.
Right.
And the people who are the early adopters at ChatGPT of all these, they're all product managers, they're all developers, like
Hmm.
people who are going online and talking about ChatGPT nonstop. A lot of them are developers who are using it to write code. So they want
Yeah,
developers to be going to say, instead of using ChatGPT, why not use Bard for all of this? Instead of integrating ChatGPT into your product using their API, why not use the new Palm API? So
right.
like that's they're targeting developers, product managers, product leads, etc. Like they want early adoption on Bard, and so that's why I think you see all these developer focused announcements.
Yeah,
Which of
I
course,
mean,
as you
which is
mentioned, it is a developer keynote. It's that's what it's supposed to be. But I think
right.
that's why you see it saw such a huge shift, a more skewed direction towards developers
Yeah,
announcements.
and good for them. So, I'll tell you what. Before we wander away from Android 14, let's kind of stick because I mean that's kind of like the core of what we're supposed to be talking about here. I know you've been playing with the betas since they came out in it was like February-ish, right? That they first
Yeah.
dropped the betas. So, what's new in Android 14? Like, what are some of the highlights that you've noticed in these? I think they're on beta 2 now. So, like, what are some of the highlights that you've noticed in the betas thus far that you think will be the most exciting?
So I think the biggest feature is the ability to grant apps partial access to your gallery.
Okay.
So whenever apps try to request access to all of your photos and videos through a certain API,
Yeah.
in the permission selection dialog, you're able to say select photos and videos. So you can pick which photos and videos an app like Facebook or Twitter can access instead of giving
Hmm.
them access to the entirety of your gallery. And I know that's something that iOS already has. I've been
Yeah.
told this like a million times, but yes, Android is adding a similar feature.
And not a lot of people know this, but WebOS back in the day. No, I'm just kidding. But WebOS never did that. But a lot of people will say, back in WebOS was one of the first. Yeah, we know, we get it. But yeah, so this is actually probably one area where iOS did actually kind of beat Android to the punch, and good for them. But as I said in a 2013 editorial entitled "Everyone Copies Everyone." Go ahead and Google that over at Pocket now, and I reference it like every year at Google I/O and at WWDC. This may not be the first, Android may not be the first company to do it, but it's a new feature for Android users, so we can be happy about that. So anyway, so yeah, that's going to be an important one. Anything else like really coming down the pipe? There's a CNET article that I want to talk about or Verge article, one of the two, that I want to talk about in a little bit about the lack of huge Android news. But anyway, any other sexy bits of the Android 14 that you've noticed thus far?
There's a whole bunch of smaller changes and some bigger changes here and there. Another
Okay.
one is like last year Google started to require that developers show the data safety information. There's like a whole section on each app listing page showing like the data safety information that developers have been declaring.
Okay.
Well, starting in Android 14, Android will pull the location information from that section and will display it in like the permission dialog. So, for example, when you're going to grant an app like Waze the location permission, you'll see a little box at the top that says this app is sharing has declared that it shares information with third parties, and then you can tap it, and then it'll show you what Waze has declared in the
Okay.
Play Store for the data safety section. And whenever an app changes the information that it declares it's sharing, then you'll get a notification once every month that tells you about this within Android.
Okay.
So this kind of information that apps are disclosing, they're self-reporting through Google Play. It won't be relegated to only Google Play anymore. It'll be shown within more and more surfaces of Android.
Gotcha. You hear that, Gas Buddy? We're on to you now. So I have a very long-standing one-sided feud with Gas Buddy, uh, but because of their data sharing stuff. So yeah, that's gonna come up monthly. So like I'm gonna pop open Gas Buddy in the beginning of March, and it's gonna say, hey, by the way, if you share your location, it's going out to third parties. And then come April 1st, it's gonna pop up again and say, by the way, they're still sharing stuff with third parties. But this is all self-declared. Does Google have any way of like figuring this out on its own? Like if Gas Buddy just said, "Nah, we're good, man. We're not sharing anything with anybody." Can Google be like, "Okay, BS. We know you're doing this." So like, This is all self-reported though, so we're kind of relying on the honor system here.
Yeah, so I mean, it's not as bad as it sounds. So yes, it's true. Like Google has no way of auditing, what every developer is saying they're doing and whether or not it's truthful or not. But because they're putting developers on the record with saying they do X or Y, if it's
Mhm.
later found out they are lying about that or they left something out by omission, Google could cite that in its policy. They could say, you left this out intentionally or you failed to disclose this. We could put that as a strike against your account or even ban you.
And
So
that's
I
why
think
we're
that
burning you to the
is,
ground. I gotcha.
yeah, I think that is an upside. So even if it is self-reported, even though they can't enforce it, I do think it is a good positive change.
Sure, absolutely, absolutely, cool. Anything? I don't want to move on too quickly. If there's anything else that you're kind of geeked about. But is there anything else that jumps to mind when it comes to Android 14 that we should be looking forward to?
I think some of the big security focused one is the ability or the restriction on the kind of applications you can install. So if you try to sideload or install an application that was built for Android versions prior to Marshmallow, which is 6.0, then
Okay,
Android won't let you install it anymore. And so the
that's
reason,
probably okay.
yeah, the reason with the restriction is that Android 6.0 introduced the runtime permission. So you know how when you're granting an app the ability to use a camera, you have to say yes or no with this dialogue.
Mm,
Before 6.0, any permissions that an app wanted, they were granted automatically when you installed them. So a
okay.
lot of malware or malicious applications take advantage of that fact. So they intentionally target older versions of Android so that they can be granted whatever permissions they want the moment you install them, instead of
No
asking the
kidding.
user for those permissions.
Huh? That's still a thing, huh? All right. Well, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean that's definitely an important one. All right. Next, what's next on your checklist there?
So two other kind of ones that I think are worth noting is the
Yeah.
ability to scale the nonlinear font scaling up to 200%. So like if you have anyone who are if you know anyone who's elderly or is older and the eyesight's just deteriorating and they use their phone at like higher font size percentages, like I know several people who do that, right? When you blow the font scaling up a lot of apps just the font just gets ridiculously large,
Okay.
right? Like some font gets massive, but other font that's already smaller gets bigger, but the kind of like disparity between the big font getting absolutely ridiculously huge and the smaller text just getting a little bit bigger is a little ridiculous. Like it kind of makes
Right.
certain apps unusable. So what the nonlinear scaling is doing is it's saying, okay, this bigger text will get bigger, but not ridiculously big. It's not going to be a linear scaling.
It'll like
So
kind of
this,
cap it basically.
yeah,
Like
yeah,
if
yeah,
something's going to be like let's just say like 72 pixels tall or something like that, then you get another font which is similar but for whatever reason at 200% it's like 90 pixels tall or whatever, then it'll like
yeah,
kind of balance it out or even it out or something.
yeah. It'll make
Okay.
things more even, which
I
I think
got you.
it's not going to affect most users here, who don't really change the font scaling or the display size. But I know there are a lot of people. I mean, Android has billions of users, so there's a lot of people who this will help.
Yeah, absolutely. Cool. All right. And what's your last item there?
Um, Another noteworthy change is the regional preferences screen.
Okay.
So, if you're, say, a Brit who's living in the U.S., right, the temperature units that you're used to might be Celsius instead of Fahrenheit, right? So if you want to tell apps that, hey, I want you to display temperature units in Celsius instead of Fahrenheit, before you'd have to hope that the app that you're using had some preferences screen that let you change that. Well, with
Okay.
the regional preferences feature in Android 14, you can tell apps on a system-wide basis that these are my preferred temperature units, these are my preferred first day of the week, etc. And then
Okay.
apps can read this information and apply it within themselves. So it's
Cool.
it's something like requires apps to support it, but this will definitely help a lot of users who may not be in tune with the majority preferences of the country they're currently residing in.
Sure.
Because a lot of
Sure.
apps just kind of assume, say, hey, your location is detected as the United States. We're going to assume that Sunday is the first day of the week for you. We're going to assume that Fahrenheit is your preferred. We're going to assume so and so. But that might not
Right.
apply to everyone.
So let me throw you a curveball here. If you had to pick, if you were king for a day, would we be on the English system or the metric system?
Metric.
Yeah, you'd go metric? All right. Yeah, I'm
Yeah.
with you. I'm with you on that. So I think, yeah, it just makes sense, you know. And a lot of people say, well, you know, US has both, but whatever. So, but yeah, that's so if we had our way, then it wouldn't matter where you were. You would just be on metric because metric is the bestest. But okay, cool. So let's go ahead and transition away from Google not from Android 14, excuse me. And I want to transition over into the Bard announcements and the generative AI stuff. Our watcher is giving us IAR 1980 is giving us a wonderful segue by asking the question: is Bard the long-term replacement of Google Assistant? And I'm a moron, so I'm going to turn that question over to you, sir. Where do you think Bard fits in the Google Assistant ecosystem?
So I think the assistant ecosystem will evolve with,
Okay,
much more improved voice replies and queries and whatnot that are using generative AI, large language models, etc. But I'm not certain if the Google Assistant brand will stick around, because it seems odd to me already that Google has been talking Bard, 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 and then all these other things, but not nary a mention of Assistant itself. It kind of feels
right.
like maybe Assistant is like a tainted brand. Kind of people associate it with being slow and clunky and not working very well. This is just my own 2 cents on this matter. So I do think that we'll eventually see an evolution of Assistant, that are using generative AI for much improved everything. But I don't know if it'll be called Google Assistant. I don't know if it'll be merged into the brand that we currently know of as Google Assistant.
Interesting, interesting. So you think Google Assistant as it exists right now, if I understand you correctly, is going to get a whole lot more Bardy, but we're not sure if we're still going to call it Google Assistant after that happens. Would you say that's kind of
Yeah.
sums it up a little bit? Yeah, okay. And I think there's such an opportunity here for Google to make Assistant so much better. And I don't know about you, we are a Google household here, so we have Google Homes and Google Screens and everything all over the place. So we use Google Assistant fairly regularly, to do all of our lights and stuff like that. But I have found Google to be getting kind of dumber over the last like 6 months or so. I can't really point at any one specific thing. I've mentioned on this podcast before that in the past when we've said like, okay, gee, what time does Target open? It'll show us like corporate information about Target, but not actually like
Yeah.
tell us what the hours are. Like, and that was kind of a weird thing that it still does every now and then, but it's a little bit less stupid these days. But just like in general, just like asking questions like the weather, that it's got that, thankfully all the smart speaker developers have been really interested in how the weather is. So like we've got that one down. That's nailed. But it just seems like a lot of the other things you ask Google to do, it's just kind of it's been, like I said, I can't point at a specific example, but it just seems like it's been getting a little less functional.
Right. I mean, I actually had this thought like this morning because I was just like recapping various things that were announced at Google I/O in my mind, and I'm like, what was the name of that one? I was literally just like googling what is the name of that project thing where you are doing video meetings and it looks like the person is 3D right in front of you. And I've actually looked it up. It's Project Starline, and I'm sure
Okay.
we'll talk about that later. But like, if I were to ask, I didn't even bother asking Google Assistant that because I just know it would have no way of like actually
Yeah,
parsing that and figuring out what the heck I'm talking about. But I'm sure if I asked Bard or ChatGPT that, it would be able to come up with an answer or something
it
that's
probably
usable.
would. It
So
probably would.
having that integrated into Google Assistant, like on smart displays, it would probably be entirely internet based. Um, but I think that would tremendously improve the usability of these devices. It's like general purpose, ask it anything and get an answer.
Yeah, yeah, very much. Now, and one thing, now Google did kind of follow Microsoft and OpenAI in the whole here's a generative language learning model. Go ahead and ask it whatever you want and get your answers. But I think one smart thing, and Microsoft did this to an extent as well, but I don't use Microsoft products, so I wasn't really paying attention all that closely. But I think like one of the smart things, and I want to call out Casey Newton, who does his platformer newsletter. That I'm not a paid subscriber. I'm more of I'm a free person subscriber, just because he does a lot of like social media, and I not really in my wheelhouse. But anyway, um, one of his free newsletters, he pointed out that Google spent a lot of time talking about Bard and about language learning models, but by integrating it into so many of its products, Gmail, Sheets, Docs, and like all of these products that people already use, it seems like a much smarter approach to kind of like let the AI kind of fade into the background and have it be just a part of these products that people are already using. And again, like Microsoft did this too with, generating, it was like generating, documents and spreadsheets. And I want to say it was even generating like PowerPoints, wasn't it? Like it
Yeah.
didn't Microsoft have it doing all that stuff too? And like that would have been super relevant to me if I used Microsoft products, which I don't. I'm more of a Google product, but still, it seemed like a really smart approach to me.
I mean, I think it's the only approach. Like, it's the only
Okay.
approach that
Okay.
makes sense. Like, pushing ChatGPT as a brand forward doesn't really make much sense. It being integrated into every app and product you already use makes a whole lot more sense. And I think that's where actually why, there's a lot of doomsaying about Google. Are they even relevant anymore with ChatGPT? Are they going to be destroyed by ChatGPT? I think there was a lot of doomsaying about that, in the early days. But I think Google still has a massive advantage because it has Android, where it can push all of its apps and services directly through its, Google Mobile Services bundling deals with OEMs and whatnot. And then it also still has, mindshare with users with Chrome, with Google Docs, with Gmail, with
Hmm.
Maps, with YouTube. It has all these places where it can push its generative AI backed services to users directly. And like already billions of users use these services
Right.
globally. And like you see, Microsoft, sure, they had a head start. Sure, they push out all these services, their generative AI based services first. And sure, a lot of users use Microsoft Office or 365 or whatever they're branding it nowadays.
Right.
But like when it comes to the big platforms like the OS, sure, Microsoft has Windows, right? But how many users use the default on Windows versus Chrome? Which is surprisingly more, more people use Chrome than the default Edge.
Oh
And
yeah.
Microsoft is
Yeah.
desperately, sorry, I think you froze for a second. Microsoft
Oh
is
yeah.
desperately trying to get people to switch to Edge. Like I'm getting an ad pretty much like every other day saying, "Hey, have you tried out the new Bing?" Like there's even like the weather app on the taskbar on Windows. Like why is there a little notification icon? I click on it. It says, "Hey, have you tried out the new Bing?" And I'm like, "What the heck, Microsoft? Why are you advertising to me on the weather widget?"
Yeah.
So
Please
yeah,
use
like
Bing.
please use Bing.
we
Like
brought
they're
we brought ChatGPT to Bing so you would use Bing. Please use Bing.
yeah, definitely the future of generative AI use is going to be through products and services that we already use. It's not going to be going to chat.openai.com or bard.google.com. That's just the early access phase. It's going to be like Google showed off at I/O. There's going to be I forgot what they call it, like a chat section of Google search or
Right.
converse. They call it converse.
That's
Like
right.
that's going
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
be how we're going to be interacting with it. We're going to be interacting it through the websites. We're going to be interacting it through the apps that we use. And I think that's where Google still has a head start over Microsoft.
Yeah, and we have another same commenter who says Google has already been using some sort of AI in a Gmail messages with predictive text, etc. Not only that, but like just when you think about I don't think a lot of people realize that AI has been a very large part of the especially the Google product catalog, but a lot of other product catalogs as well. In terms of like the chat bots that companies make you suffer through before they'll actually let you talk to a representative. That's all AI. The Google Photos when you're searching for pictures of your wife from 19 no, I guess it wouldn't start with a 19, but 2003. Like that's all AI stuff. That's all. I just and I like to continuously point out that Stargate was using AI way before it was cool, because
Yeah.
we had a previous guest on this podcast talking about the Stargate AI program. I don't know if you're a fan of the show. No offense. I won't take offense if you're not, because it's not the sexy one. But anyway, I just AI has been out there for a very long time, and I think we're all just starting to kind of like realize that. I think the main difference between what it was doing before and what it was doing now was what it was doing before was kind of controlled from a corporate standpoint, whereas now they're putting AI in the hands of the masses per se. And so
Yeah.
now we're starting to get a good idea as to like what the actual capabilities are.
I mean, I think before ChatGPT, like you mentioned, AI was much more built in to the background of products and services that we use. But since ChatGPT blew up in like November, December, everyone is much more aware of AI and asking questions. They want to see it, especially like investors, right? They want to see AI front and center. So now
Mhm.
you're getting all these buttons that are like clearly labeled as AI, and like on the front page, Google says generative AI, right? Like, is that's not something Google would have put on any of its products, like, as like a text, flavor text before
Last year,
ChatGPT
yeah.
blew up, right? It's not the kind of thing. It's not the kind of thing you would think of showing the user, right? Like, what kind of user would have known what the heck you're talking about when you say generative AI before? But now
Mhm.
it's all everyone thinks about. Like, it's all they kind of expect to see. You want AI in your products, and if you're not pushing it front and center, they're gonna think it's not there. Like
What?
it's already like the commenter mentioned, it's already been there. It's already been there in Gmail and Maps, etc. But if you're
Yeah.
not putting it front and center, users are going to think it's not there.
Well, and like, wasn't it last year at Google I/O that Google brought out? I think was it Lambda based, where you could like talk to a planet and ask questions about like how the planet was, and like I remember like to a person, like everyone was just like, okay, so and like
Yeah.
now it's just like they could wheel out that same demonstration. We'd be like, oh my god, I can talk to a planet. That's amazing. And it's just it's such a kind of a funny cultural shift that we're kind of going
hmm
through.
I
Um,
th-
go ahead.
yeah, on that front, I think it's just because Google before ChatGPT blew up was just very conservative about how they approached AI. So like you mentioned, like why did they use an example of you talking to a planet? Like who the heck would want to do that? That's another potential to go viral. But
Right.
nowadays you have people who are using ChatGPT and like mimicking the personality of Steve Jobs. And
Mm-hmm.
obviously there are a lot of like ethical concerns about, pretending making a chatbot pretend it's a dead person,
I don't see
right?
any. I'm
Well,
just kidding.
I'm just saying.
I'm kidding.
But
Because
but
you're
you see
just
what I
like
mean, right?
you were just like, you look on your
I was
face is like, holy shit, is he serious?
like, but you see what I mean, right? Like before ChatGPT, Google was just publishing research papers. They were showing these demonstrations off. Like they were very mild and conservative in their approach. But now, like all everything's they're
All
unchained.
hell has broken loose, I think, is what you're
Google
looking
has been
for.
unchained.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So just like, well, screw it. I guess we gotta go.
Yeah.
Hog crazy. Um,
But I mean, to be fair, they're not like they did bring up seven pillars of AI research. They did say there are several things they're doing to ensure that AI is used safely and responsibly, like their with their metadata and the watermarking they're doing, the showing on Google search, when an image was generated, etc. Like there's a lot of things they're saying they're doing, like whether or not this will actually help reduce disinformation, etc. remains to be seen, but
right.
they're not just actually letting their AI researchers run wild.
Right, which is important. Now, it seems to me, of all the things that they mentioned, generative AI could help you in all of the Google products. Like it seems to me, and maybe I just missed this, but it seems to me the one missed opportunity that Google had there was the very thing that I've been using ChatGPT for the past 4 months or so is YouTube descriptions. Like, why is Google not rolling out? And obviously, we're not going to be able to answer this question, and determine how Google feels about this. But like, why isn't there not a button when you're done recording a video where you can push the button and have it scan a transcript of everything that just happened in the video and then spit out like 6 paragraphs about like here's what the YouTube description is, complete with hashtags and everything. Like, why did Google miss that bus? That's just it seems like such low hanging fruit. It's
I, I know Google, or I mean, at least YouTube seems to do its own set of things separately. Like they're pretty independent.
Yeah,
So I suspect we'll get like a separate announcement from YouTube about
and
all the
it'll
things
probably be
they're
using
introducing
ChatGPT.
generative AI. Yeah.
No, not
No, I
that
think
separate. Not that separate. But yeah. So I mean, like I don't know. You probably I don't know if you know, but I have been using ChatGPT to write YouTube descriptions since I got access to it, which was like somewhere in like beginning of February. And you know what? It's honestly made my job as a YouTuber a lot easier because I could just like pop in, like write a YouTube description for talking about this and this and this and this, and it'll just and it's great.
yeah.
I love it. Love it. It's a rocking good time. So now, one of the things I think one of the most highly anticipated announcements that they talked about at Google I/O was in the hardware department. And I'm going to make this one dealer's choice, Mishaal. Which one do you want to talk about first? We have the Pixel 7a, we have the Pixel Fold, and we have the Pixel, called the Pixel tablet, right? I don't know.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
was too busy oogling over the Pixel Fold when they brought that one out.
Well,
So like, which
it's
one do you want
clear
to talk
which
about
one
first?
it's clear which one you want to talk about first. So let's go with the Pixel Fold.
Okay, yeah, let's do it. So $1,800, which is was that the same price tag that the original
Yeah.
Samsung Fold came out with?
Well,
Because I saw
I don't know the
somewhere that said
original.
like,
The
yeah,
Z Fold 4 MSRP, I mean, started at $1,800 also.
yeah. Okay. I definitely knew the latest one did. I thought the earlier ones were actually like closer to the $2,000 range, but anyway, it was 4 years ago. Who cares? So, but no. So the Pixel Fold, has a retail price of $1,800. It has large bezels, which we are only allowed to mention once on this podcast, or the ghost of Michael Fisher will appear and slay us both. But it does have the larger bezels on the top and bottom, and I think it was in a Michael Fisher thread that I saw, or maybe it was actually his video on the Fold. He mentioned that the bezels kind of similar to the Surface Duo, kind of had that same kind of vibe to them. The
I mean, the reason, like a lot of some YouTubers who asked Google about the bezels said that the reason they were able to get the Pixel Fold so thin is because they put some of the hinge mechanism into the bezels, into the
Yeah.
area where the bezels are. So that was the reasoning that was given.
Okay. Well, yeah. I just from a consumer design standpoint, it had that kind of same vibe as like the Google as the Surface Duo. But do you think that this is something that like on a scale of 1 to 10, how much did we need a Pixel Fold at this point, in your opinion?
I definitely think it's very, very important. I don't know
Okay.
how I'd rate it. Actually, I'd probably put it like a 10
Okay.
because we definitely need, because so far outside of the US, like how many non Samsung foldables can you count on your hand? Like probably like
Outside of the
nothing.
U.S., quite a
Outside of the
few.
US. Well, sorry.
inside
I
the
mean,
U.S., inside the
inside
U.S.,
the US,
there are
yes,
now two.
there are now two.
Yeah.
Yeah, I meant outside of China.
Right. No, I get that. Yeah.
Right.
I think I followed where you were going there, but I took you too
But
literally.
I messed up. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
No, that's okay. But yeah, you're right. Samsung was in desperate need of competition, but then the question is, will the Pixel Fold be competition? Like,
I don't think Google will compete in terms of volume, but
right.
I do think the importance lies in how much they're investing into the foldable experience, the foldable software experience, because all the things they're doing to improve the general um, look and feel of applications on foldable devices, how apps react to the different hinge angles, how the camera orientation is affected by, applications assuming the position of the camera. Like all these idiosyncrasies, all these little intricacies that, of another OEM, the way they would solve it would just be, asking the app developer to fix it to make a device specific fix for their
Right.
device, or maybe implementing some kind of hack that's proprietary to their version of Android.
Right.
Whereas when Google is doing it, they're not going to be saying, okay, here's a Pixel Fold only specific fix that will do. They're going to say, okay, here's a new API, here are some new guidelines, here are some things that OEMs can configure to broadly fix things. And so a lot of these things they're doing will greatly benefit, foldables in general.
Right. Okay. Yeah, and you definitely have a good point there. Now, I think this is actually a really kind of exciting year in terms of like foldables in the U.S. because it did. In addition to the Pixel Fold, OnePlus has already announced that they're going to bring a foldable to the U.S. market as well. So that's exciting as well. Out of curiosity, did you have a chance to go hands on with the Pixel Fold?
I did, yeah.
Okay. Give us your hands-on impressions here, if you can.
I guess I mean I don't have that much experience with the book style foldable,
Okay.
but I wasn't like I think I was fine with the bezels.
Okay.
I liked how even evenly distributed the weight was. So like it was very nice to hold the Pixel Fold in the hand, like
Okay.
both folded and unfolded. You would think like it's actually supposed to be pretty heavy. I think it's heavier than the Z Fold 4. Um, but its thinness, it really stands out. Like it's definitely very comfortable to hold.
Nice.
I didn't like how tactile the crease is. Like I don't know if that's a problem on other foldables, but like you can definitely see the crease and like touching.
Yeah,
I don't really like that experience. Like
it's a thing.
yeah, yeah,
It's a thing.
yeah.
Okay. All right. So what about the software experience? Like going from the smaller screen opening up into the bigger screen. How did you feel that was handled? Are we liking that?
Well, I didn't have the chance to like use a lot of the apps that I used on a daily basis because like
Sure.
they were
Sure.
just demo units at the IO backstage. Like I didn't have the chance to install Reddit, Telegram, Twitter, etc.
And
But
those demo units were preloaded with all the apps that are perfectly optimized to do exactly that. So, yeah, hashtag yay demo units. Anyway,
I mean,
but
they did have Google Play Store installed, and I was able to install like just out of curiosity. I installed Venmo because Venmo is one of those apps where it tries to lock itself to portrait mode. So if you
okay,
have the Oppo Find N2, I talked about this on Twitter actually. Like if you have an Oppo Find N2 or the OnePlus tablet, for example, and you try to install the Venmo app, it'll lock itself to tablet, so forcing you to flip the device to use it.
yeah,
So how the Pixel Fold handles that is it uses something that I mentioned, like Google. They don't use device-specific hacks. They use something that is available to all OEMs or app developers. So
right,
what they're using is one of those things that I mentioned. They have a feature that overrides the orientation request of an app. So even though Venmo says it wants to run in portrait mode, the Pixel Fold will say, no, we're going to run you in landscape mode, but we're going to put you in a letterbox so that the aspect ratio isn't messed up.
right,
So that's kind of what it does. Like it puts it in a letterbox. It's displayed upright, and it has like a gray bar on the side, and then you
okay.
can double tap to reposition to left or right.
That's pretty cool. So when it asks for that portrait orientation, and this is something that's running on a system level, or is this something that has to be baked into an app, or
Yeah, it's
what's
the app. It's Venmo. It's apps like Venmo themselves that are hard coding, saying we only want to run in portrait mode.
right? Right. And so then Google on a system level in Android is saying, no, 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 this is displaying the proper orientation. We're just going to letterbox it so that we're not
Yeah,
making people like flip around their. Oh, thank
yeah.
God. So are you saying that we might actually finally have an Instagram that runs properly on a foldable phone? Because that would be amazing. So
Well,
Instagram is
running
notorious.
well running properly would require Instagram to actually like fully optimize. Like
Right.
Google at I/O, they had like sessions on how to optimize your apps for full screen, large screen devices. Then they had like three different tiers, and
Right.
like Instagram, any app that's letterbox would be like tier one. I think tier one is the lowest, and then like
Hmm.
tier three would be like a fully optimized independent version of the app that's available for large screens.
Yeah.
So
That's like
like
completely redesigned to do whatever,
Right.
whatever you want your app to do in taking advantage
Yeah.
of that real estate. Okay. All right. Well, that's cool. I'm digging that. Let's transition over to the Pixel 7a, which I think is I read an article by, was this The Verge, that said Google that Google I/O displayed showed that Google has no idea how to sell hardware or something like this, because well, the main one of the main arguments is that the Pixel 7a, it compares very favorably to the Pixel 7, which is only $100 more. And so it left a lot of people wondering, like, why would you buy a Pixel 7 when the Pixel 7a exists? You've got the 90 hertz screen, you've got wireless charging, you've
Mhm.
got a smaller screen, but honestly, and I've said this on this show before, 6.1 is kind of my spirit animal. Like the 6.1-inch screen, that just seems like the perfect size for me. So I would be lying if I said I wasn't tempted to trade in my Pixel 7 for a Pixel 7a, even though that would be a terrible financial decision.
Yeah.
But anyway, so like, where did you get a chance to have you had a chance to play with the Pixel 7a? Do you have a Pixel 7a? I mean, it's out there now, right? So
No, I don't have one.
you don't
But I
have
mean,
one.
I've had this same thought in my mind ever since I heard about the 90 hertz and wireless charging, factoids in the leaks many, many months ago, because this thing is leaked to oblivion before it was
Right.
announced. And so I was wondering, like, where does this put the Pixel 7? Because all the Pixel 7 has over the 7a is it has its more metal, unibody,
Yep.
and it also has a higher IP rating, so it's like more dust and water resistant. I
And
think
a
it's
slightly
IP
larger screen.
68,
Yeah.
slightly larger screen. So it really has very little going for it compared to the 7a. It justifies getting it over
Right.
the A series phone. I'm really not sure. I don't like. I think we're gonna see what Google decides when the 8 series is announced. Like, is there going to be an 8A? Is it going to be even lower end? Or is the regular 8 going to be higher end than it is in this generation? Like, I'm not really sure. Like, it's
I
it's clear. I think the 7A is going to cannibalize sales of the 7. That's for sure.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah, I'm kind of curious as to, like, what they can do to the Pixel 8, because I mean, this time last year we knew what was coming with the Pixel 7 because Google announced it at Google I/O, which Google did not do this year, which is interesting in and of itself. But it does make you wonder what the future of that Pixel 8a will be, or the Pixel 8. God, I hate phone names. What the Pixel 8 will be. Okay, and then there's one last piece of hardware to talk about, and that is the Pixel tablet, which is, I think Google might have outthought itself a little bit. The same article that I was talking about with the Google hardware mentioned that Google wants to sell the Pixel tablet. Now the Pixel tablet, remind me, does it come with the charging stand? I believe it.
Yeah,
Okay,
it does.
so but the charging stand is just kind of like a dumb charging stand that just kind of sits on your counter and doesn't really have any utility unless you actually put the tablet on it.
Right.
I believe I'm correct with that.
Right.
So that same article pointed out, like, why not make that like a Google, the new Google Mini or the Google Home Mini or something, so that there'd be some utility when you're not using it as a stand for your tablet. Um, Same question that I asked about the Pixel Fold. Do we need a Pixel tablet at this point in time?
So, I mean, there's a question of need and question of want. So I think the Pixel tablet does serve like a segment that was kind of underserved before. So
Okay.
most people, Google correctly, I think, outlined in their keynote that most people use their tablets at home. They're not taking them everywhere with them to
Right.
travel with them or whatnot. Like 80% of the use is at home.
Mhm.
And so a lot of times the tablet is also being used as like a shared family device, right? Like you swap it, you give it to your kids or something, you use it yourself. So Google kind of optimized the Pixel tablet for those two use cases. So at home,
Okay.
it's a smart display when it's not being used, and anyone in your family can go up to it and tap the home button and control smart home devices. They can see notifications on the screen, and then if you take it off, you can use it as your personal tablet by switching profiles.
Right. That's an important that's an important distinction, and one that we haven't seen on a lot on have we seen that on any tablets yet? I mean,
So,
there have been some Android tablets with profiles on them.
well, yeah, most tablets. I think most tablets do support multi-user experiences. Like Android has supported multi-user for a long time, but Google has
Sure.
been improving the multi-user experience since Android 13. Yeah, I think in the early betas they've been improving quietly on the UI and the experience of switching between profiles and what it can do. And we've seen other tablets that double as smart displays. Like there have been some from Lenovo, for example, but none of them have really put this experience front and center. Like the docks for those Lenovo tablets are kind of like a secondary thought.
Right.
Like they would enter Google Assistant Smart Display mode. I forgot exactly what it was called. I don't even know if
Yeah.
Google supports that anymore. But now Google
Lenovo
has
did a
like
lot of that for a while there. The Lenovo had a lot of
yeah,
tablets that you could dock into like a smart screen display. I actually
yeah,
have one of the docks right here. So this is the dock that went with the what was it, the 10T, I think it was. So anyway,
yeah.
I don't know why that was randomly sitting on my table. It just was, and I happened to remember that it was there.
The Pixel tablet clearly looks like it was meant for this, but
Right.
it's not an afterthought. Like it literally looks like a 10-inch Nest Hub Max when you dock it.
Yeah. And I think and one of the things that I have said many times on this podcast before is one of the challenges that comes with making an Android tablet is figuring out what the tablet is going to do in its downtime. And like one thing that OnePlus addressed with the OnePlus pad that just came out was a month-long standby time. So you can, yes, the tablet will be sitting on a shelf, but at least when you pick it up off that shelf, it's going to be ready to go. And Lenovo, like I mentioned, and a couple of other companies have tried to do that smart display thing where you like when you're not using it, you set it into your dock and it turns into a sort of a pseudo Google Home, which wasn't very good. But anyway, so like a lot of companies have tried to answer that question. And I think turning it into a smart display is probably one of the easiest ways to go. But I also like the idea of having those docks spread out through your house as like Google Homes so that you can set the tablet like on the dock next to your bedroom when you're going to bed, and then you can pick it up and move it to the kitchen when you're going to eat breakfast and stuff like that. So I
Yeah,
kind of I'm not going to call that a miss, but I'm going to call it a less than ideal situation, I guess.
you can get more of those docks. They cost $129 each.
Right,
So
but they don't do anything except
yeah,
act as a dock. Like if they did something more, I think maybe there's a point to be made there. But
yeah.
anyway,
I'm hoping they unlock. Like I'm hoping maybe that functionality is maybe there's a chip inside that supports it and just it wasn't ready for launch, and maybe they unlock it with a firmware update. Because I'm pretty sure they they probably can push firmware updates to it because you connect to it via the pogo pins on the back, and I'm pretty sure it's like
right?
using a USB connection. So like the dock is treated as like a USB audio dock, I think, when the Pixel
Yeah,
tab connects to it.
yeah,
So hopefully they're able to push firmware updates to it, and hopefully they're able to unlock cast functionality, or maybe even Bluetooth functionality. I doubt Bluetooth, but I'm hoping at least cast.
right. Yeah, that would be. I want to say I think Google did say that they had cast capability in the tablet itself, right?
Yeah, yeah. The tablet can act as a Google Cast receiver, same way any Android TV can.
Right, right. Okay, okay. I want to say that was there. Okay, cool. Well, I think we have covered a lot of Google I/O, a lot of Android, and a lot of the hardware. And I think I've kept you about as long as I said I was going to keep you. So now the only thing we need to do is roll out the red carpet for you, and you can tell people where they can find you on the internets, and we can wrap this up and put this baby to bed.
Yeah, so if you want to follow me on Twitter at Mishaal Rahman, that same handle, you can find me on Reddit, on Mastodon and on the Android dev server, on Discord, Telegram, etc. Like I have the same. My username is my name, so search me up. You'll find me on all these different platforms. And you want to follow me if you want to learn more about Android because I post all the time, day in day out about Android. What's new? What's coming? What's in the works, whatnot.
Indeed. And you are an awesome follow and an awesome guest. I would like to thank you very much for coming on and talking to all of us about all the androids. But for now, that's going to do it for this episode of the podcast. Please consider subscribing to this podcast if you enjoyed it. And if you really enjoyed it, I would love it if you would write a review for the show. And if you're watching this on YouTube, click that subscribe button and smash that bell so you can be notified of new episodes and reviews and interviews as they drop. And if you want some early access, jump onto Patreon at patreon.com/benefit of the Doud. I'd like to thank co-producer Cliff for all of his hard work behind the scenes. And I'd like to thank Mishaal for coming on and talking to us, learning all of us about Android. But most of all, and as always, I would like to thank you for listening and for giving us the benefit of the Doud.